So you went through the John Riley and the Jim Chapin book and you have your coordination dialed, but it just feels like you're going in circles. If this is happening to you, it's not because you don't have enough vocabulary. It's not because you don't have enough coordination. It's because you don't have phrasing for your comping. So today I'm going to show you how to push and drive the band with something called releases so you can start being a dynamic jazz drummer who pushes the band when you comp. So when we first learn to comp, it's difficult just to keep the ride cymbal consistent and play varied phrases on our snare and bass. And that's why so much of the jazz literature focuses on coordination and comping, because it's kind of the first hurdle that you need to jump over. But once you start to get good at that, you're still going to be plugging away at the coordination, but you're going to start to feel like, I just wish like I could mix it up, or like, I feel like I'm going in circles, or I feel like I'm playing like with the band, but I'm not really with them. I'm not really like pushing them or inspiring them. I'm just kind of playing along to them. And the reason for this is because you haven't developed your sense of phrasing, okay? And that's why we use something called releases, okay? Now, a release, it's really simple. It's just a small crash during your comping that adds kind of like a landing point for your comping to lead to, okay? I kind of think of it like a vacation, If you're just going to work every day and doing the same thing over and over again, it gets really boring and you're less productive. But if you have a little vacation, then you have something planned to look forward to. And that's kind of what the releases are. It's something for your comping to kind of like orient itself around so that every little comping phrase you play is just more meaningful, okay? So that's what we're going to work on today. We're going to work on releases so that you can make your comping more meaningful. You can push the band. Let's dive right into it. Okay, so a release is really simple. It just sounds like this. Okay, so the trick here is we don't want to do like a big gong crash like this, right? And we also don't want it to really stick out too loud. Like, that's a bit too much. What we want is we want to do this kind of like slap across the cymbal where we hit the broad part of the stick on like the bow of the cymbal like this. You don't need to really hit it too hard. If you just kind of like slap it like that, you'll get the accent you're looking for. And usually we either accompany it with the snare or we accompany it with the bass. Okay, so that's what a release is. Now, you got to think about where to put them, okay? The easiest place is to just put them at natural phrase points, like every 4 bars, every 8 bars, every 2 bars. Let's try playing a 4-bar phrase where every 4 bars we play a release, okay? 1, 2, 3. Okay, couple things there. I played 1 on the end of 4. I played 1 on beat 1. Those are pretty much interchangeable in jazz music. And a 4 really feels like 1, okay? Now the next step is how can I make my comping sort of lead to the release? And this is kind of the thing I love about releases is it makes your comping not just these little coordination exercises, but it makes it musical phrases because it's going somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start comping. I'm going to do something and see if I can naturally kind of dovetail it into a release. Let's see what happens. All right, there you go. So you can see already it's got more shape and more vibe to it. Now, what we can do is we can start to think about like, how can I kind of set up some tension for the release, right? This is one of the core things when you're playing jazz music. You want tension, release, okay? So one of the simplest ways that you can build tension when you're comping is just to use repetition. Just say something, just say something, just say something, and say it again. You see, I just said it over and over again. You're like, what is the last part, right? And you can do the same thing with comping. So if I do something like this, so simple. Maybe something like this. right? Again, very simple, but it makes it make sense. It makes the release like something to build to, okay? The other thing you can use, and I use it a little bit there actually, is polyrhythm, right? So something that's maybe a 3/4 or a 5/4, right? So like if I was playing a 2-bar phrase and I wanted to play a 3/4 in my left hand, I could resolve it with a release like this. Right? If I did like a 5/4, right? And you see there on the last one, I kind of fudged it however I needed to in order to find the release point. That's the thing with these tension and release. It's not like you need to line this up mathematically. You can do some of that to figure out the coordination of it and all. But really, this is more like an energy thing. It's like tension, tension, and then let me release it however makes sense. It's more important that you have the tension and the release than it is that you line it up perfectly with perfect polyrhythm math. Now, once you start to get better at this, you can put the releases in more unexpected places. So far, I've just been doing it every 4 bars, but Philly Joe, for example, he would play it like on beat 4 of the next 4-bar phrase, right? So he'd build it, build, 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 and then he'd do a short note on beat 1 and release on beat 4. So something like this. So boom, you do put it on beat 4. You'll hear Brian Blade, he'll release on like beat 2 after where you thought the release would be, okay? So you really want to experiment with like, what does it feel like when I release early? What does it feel like when I release late in order to find some ways that you can be really musical? Now, where this really becomes magical is when you play it with other musicians and maybe you release in the gaps when they stop soloing, or you release with them or against them. That's the real magic of this. It's not just like an exercise thing, okay? So in a second, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play along to a classic Ray Brown trio track, and I'm going to see if I can use some of these releases in context with them. Before I do that, if you're watching all of this and you're like, I could really use some help executing on this, and the number of other things in my playing, like solo vocabulary, how do I transcribe, what tunes do I learn, how do I stop getting lost in the form? That's what I help my mentorship students with at the Jazz School. If you're interested in getting more information on that, just click the link in the description and I'll send it over. Okay, really simple. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to throw on this great Ray Brown trio track with Benny Green on piano. I'm just going to play along and see if I can use releases in context in a really organic, natural way. Maybe there'll be some polyrhythms, maybe there'll be some repetition, but there'll definitely be some releases. Let's give it a go. So there you go. If you use releases, your comping will be interesting, dynamic, and it's going to push the band. But then you're going to need to learn how to play with them and against them. So click here to watch my video on how to comp like a real jazz drummer.